For those of you who are watching later, this will be recorded, and you'll be able to go back and view this in its entirety whenever you want. But again, welcome to Watch and Stitch. My name is Bryan. This is the very first class we're doing with this type of curriculum, which we're really happy to bring you, our new educational curriculum, which we'll be doing on a monthly basis, Watch and Stitch. The Watch and Stitch itself for March, you can get on the website. It's $30, and you'll be able to follow along with us for every project. Or if you're watching this later in the month or months after, you can still get it and go back and watch the videos, which is the best part because I'll always be there to watch it any time. So let's go ahead and jump right in and get ahead of things. And then once we get on some embroidery runs, I'll slow it down a bit and start going through details, tips, and tricks, and everything else with you. But today, we are going to be starting off the very first Watch and Stitch with our Confetti Blocks designs. So we're going to be doing this fun fellow right here, which is on page 5 for the number steps. We're doing that polar bear. And of course, your materials list, which will be very important, will be on page 1 of the Confetti Blocks, which is going to have everything that you're going to need to go through these. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it, and then I'll circle back to really explain what confetti is and the fundamentals behind doing this technique. I'm currently going to be using a black thread for the first several steps. That way you can see it easier on camera. But I would recommend using something tonal if you're at home doing this. That way those stitches don't show up later down the road. So for this materials list, of course, we have our no-show mesh. It's the foundation for all of our quilt blocks or pretty much anything that we're actually sewing two items together. I've gone ahead and hooped that. I've got the rest of my materials from that materials list pre-prepped. And I've got my number steps out, my picture steps, and I'm ready to go ahead and go. I've got my design locked and loaded. So first we're going to read the very first number step, which is a squaring stitch, then place our batting. Now if you're new to Anita's quilting technique, we don't actually hoop anything for any of our quilt blocks except for the cutaway. Once the actual cutaway is hooped, we use what we're basically famous for, which is our paint by numbers approach to quilting and embroidery. So now I'm going to let the digitizing do placement stitches for any other material that's going to go in the hoop as we move along. The same will pertain for any applique you have, or folded fabric, but we're not doing folded fabric in this one. However, you'll notice that we like to quilt as we go. So that way you don't have to later on come back around and requilt the whole thing yourself. The actual digitizing is doing it for you. So we are going to add our batting in and completely cover that squaring stitch. Now if you're at home and you're wondering, well, how much batting do I need to cut out? Run the placement stitch, measure it, and then just cut it slightly larger so it grabs when you go to tack it in place. Now that we're on step 2, I'll go ahead and run the tack down stitch for the batting. So we're going to secure that. If you're following along with the picture steps, that's perfectly fine, but make sure you always have your number steps out. This is going to give you the step-by-step for every single thing for each particular design. The picture steps are going to be a reference for technique, terminology, etc. So now that we're tacking down the batting, if you are following along with the picture steps, this is where it's kind of showing you, okay, and step A of the pictures, you know, we hooped our stabilizer. B and C, we did the placement stitch. We placed our batting. D is when we tacked down our batting. And E is showing you that we're going to trim that excess batting from all the way around the squaring stitch. Reason being is because we don't want batting in our seam allowance. It makes sewing things together later on a lot more difficult. It's harder to butterfly press the seams open. All right. Now we got that tack down run. I'll go ahead and trim it, and then you guys will see on camera once it's back in the hoop for you. But when trimming your batting, you want to trim it as close to that tack down as you can. There is a little wiggle room because the tack down for the batting is actually slightly inset from the tack down, or excuse me, for the squaring stitch rather, which was that very first placement stitch. When we say squaring stitch with our quilting technique, it's essentially referring to the very first stitch of every quilt block, and no stitching will occur outside of our squaring stitch because the squaring stitch is the boundary that shows us where our seam allowance is. Anything outside the squaring stitch is a part of the seam allowance. All right, so we've gone ahead and trimmed our batting just like the photos, which is why those picture steps are handy, because sometimes you're like, well, how close do I need to trim? We've already got that kind of mapped out for you in the pictures, so it's a really quick and easy reference to use. All right, so we've completed step 2. Go ahead. Get this over. I'll continue using that dark thread to make it easy for everyone to see. Now I can see here that step 3 is telling me to do the tacking stitch. Well, for what? Well, now I need to make sure that I've gone back and reread my previous step, which was the tacking stitch for the batting, and then it says place the base fabric. So we're going to take our base fabric, completely cover the entire squaring stitch area. Remember, that first stitch is still visible. So we're going to completely cover it and make sure that any excess we have extends at least a ½ inch into the seam allowance all the way around. So, oops, let me rethread that real quick. So right away, you can see how this differs from doing a traditional quilt block in the hoop when you're embroidering on it, because we didn't have to hoop a whole piece of fabric. We didn't have to measure anything or guess where it's going to stitch out. We have our paint by numbers approach. So all those placement stitches, everything else really helps us minimize waste, take out the guesswork, and make what's traditionally a much harder, well, you know, quilting generally is an intermediate or advanced thing you would learn to do. If you're learning from scratch, you're starting off with simpler techniques. You're not diving right into a confetti block with applique and everything else. A lot of people will typically start off with doing much simpler, like paper piece style blocks. But even then, we make our paper piecing much easier as well with a technique that we call folded fabric. So now that I'm running the tack down stitch for the base fabric, and same thing with that base fabric, when you're wondering how much do you need to prep, well, you measure the squaring stitch. You can cut your batting, like I said, just barely larger than it. So if the squaring stitch measures 8 by 8 inches, you can cut your batting 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. That's fine. For your fabric, if it's 8 by 8 inches, the squaring stitch, but I need to make sure I have a ½ inch seam allowance all the way around, well, then I would cut my fabric 9 by 9. So just some quick tips for you on how to pre-prep everything. And once again, for those of you just tuning in or watching, I am using a darker thread right now, just so it shows up on camera. For the stitches I'm referencing, I would recommend using a tonal thread at home. That way it doesn't peek out later on when you don't want it to. So once we get down this base fabric, and this is a little more evident in the picture steps themselves, but we've gone ahead and run step 3, the tacking stitch. Now, beyond that, it's saying do not trim base fabric, then place confetti and netting. However, where's my visual cue on how I'm supposed to do that? That's the picture steps. Right away, you can see in G, which is the picture step I'm referencing, G, it's telling you to run the tacking stitch for the base fabric. It's also going to go ahead and run the placement area of where our additional applique is going to go. This is essentially the no-go zone for your confetti. So what is the confetti? Well, we essentially, like most of you, will have a thread catcher by our stations, and you start collecting all these little scraps of different thread, maybe some yarn, ribbons, etc. That is perfect to use for your actual confetti. You can, of course, cut it up to be a bit smaller, but this is where we're going to go around and just start laying things down into our actual confetti block. So it's okay to overlap into, or inside rather, the placement stitch. It just helps minimize on unneeded waste to know where you don't need to fill it in, because later on, the whole area of the actual face and scarf is going to be covered in just regular applique. So that right away tells me it would be a waste to put a bunch of fabric in there, but I don't need to fret about having any of that actual fabric crossing over into the actual applique area. And of course, applique, done the same way as the quilt block that we've started so far. It's just a paint by numbers approach. So I can know exactly where I'm supposed to put my fabric down. I don't have to sew anything by hand. We're just going to let the digitizing do all that work. When you have a lot of different types or pieces of small fabric, scraps, or confetti, etc., and you're wondering how should I place it, it's completely aesthetic and up to you. But I like to purposely somewhat spread things out to where there's not blobs of certain colors in certain areas. You want to kind of spread out any of the different types of materials or colors that you have to kind of add to the whole effect. Again, if we're crossing the lines, it's okay. It's not like coloring in class where you get yelled at. For coloring outside the lines, it's okay with this confetti to lap it over into the applique area. Once again, just to reiterate that. All right. I'll put a few more down here, maybe spread out some of these tan pieces just to add to it. All right. Now, what you need to know about this is you may be wondering why we have a tool listed as the actual, as one of the materials rather. Well, the tool is what's going to hold all this confetti down. It doesn't matter how much stitching we do on top of this confetti. If there is not something translucent to go on top of it, it's just going to fall out and go all over the place. Or you have to do so much stitching that you can't even see the confetti. So since we want this to be the aesthetic highlight of our design, we're going to use tulle. You can also use organza if you like. Any type of very sheer material, but traditional confetti, we really like using the actual tool itself. All right, now that I got a good spread on my confetti there, we have our tool. I'm going to go ahead and take it and completely cover the entire block. If you're newer to this, I would recommend taking the hoop out of the machine. That way you can lay it straight down, because if you try to slide it in, you'll find that you end up, the way I just did it, you'll find that you end up moving a lot of the confetti with it sometimes. And then I would give it some good tape around the edges, or if you're comfortable, you can just hold it down while it does its tack down and go from there. But keep in mind, all that confetti and then tulle on top is just very lofted. You may or may not be able to see on the camera right now. What's going to happen is you're going to drop your presser foot, and if nothing's securing that tulle, it's just going to shift the whole thing. So let's see if I can not do that. I'm just going to hold mine down. But if you're not comfortable holding this with your fingers, then I would definitely recommend taping it. And if you notice it, the way it kind of did right here, it started to bunch up a good bit. That's an indication to me to hit stop and readjust the tool so that I don't end up pushing everything, because that's what the presser foot is going to naturally want to do. All right, I'm going to keep it nice and taut there. Again, tape will do that just fine for you. Once you get this tack down stitch around the edge done, you're really not going to need to hold it anymore. It's going to be doing quilting stitches after this, but it'll be nice and taut after that. And now I don't even have to hold it anymore. So at this point in time, it does this tack down stitch. I'm going to clear out all the other confetti scraps I have, save it for the next one. But as we're running step 4 here, you'll notice that it says the tacking stitch for the confetti, netting, and background stitching. So it's doing this tack down stitch, and it's going to come through and do these diamond quilt stitches all in the same step. All right. Because if you remember, I mentioned that we quilt as we go. So typically in traditional quilting, you would be doing these diamond quilt stitches essentially after you've sewn your whole quilt together. That's typically when you would quilt it, is when you quilt the back fabric and the batting and the entire top piece of that quilt all together. That's when you get that dimension. But because we quilt as we go, we're adding that dimension to each block as we build it, which some good examples are some of the other confetti quilt blocks here that we've done. Obviously the dimension's a little bit hard to see on camera, especially since we have a lot of confetti going on it as well. But other examples of the designs you get with Watch and Stitch, it's not just the one that we're doing here on screen, but there's several projects every single month that we're going to be doing videos on with multiple designs per project. The number of designs just depends on the complexity of each one and what we release that month. All right. Hold it. Which way? Put it up again. Like this. All right. So, in fact, let me just show you. They did a little 4-block sewn together here. And when I was mentioning earlier about this one, is that better in frame? Right here. When I mentioned that we build our quilt blocks as we go, these are examples of a single quilt block that's done and out of the hoop. We trimmed it to our 1/2-inch seam allowance. Then we've taken multiple of those and sewn them together. Now, whether I'm doing this as a placemat, as a pillow, as a king-size quilt, it doesn't matter. It just builds up from there. But they left the back unfinished on here, which is great because I want you to see that, when we go to sew our quilt blocks together, and there's tons of videos on this on our website, YouTube as well. We're putting right sides together. This is why that 1/2-inch seam allowance is handy, because it's much easier to butterfly press this 1/2-inch seam allowance open once we've sewn them together. That way, when we do put the backing on, it's not like trapuntoed in the back, where it's all that extra fabric is pushing it up. And you can also see why we like to trim our batting, because if that batting was in here too, we'd have even more to press down on. So it's always handy to, one, as I mentioned at the beginning, trim your batting and make sure you have that 1/2-inch seam allowance. It's easier to work with than a 1/4-inch. It's wasted fabric if it's more than that, in our opinion. But that'll make it the easiest to get the back of your quilts nice and cleaned up. Because this one right here, they just did the binding on it, but on our YouTube page, that's where we have all of that. Which, speaking of which, no matter what you're on, social media of ours, YouTube, don't forget to like, comment. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Instagram or Facebook, follow us. That way you can be up to date with everything that we're doing. All of our education that we, for the most part, put online is for free. You will be ahead of time notified if we're doing a special select class where we'll be charging for it, but you can find hundreds and hundreds of videos on our YouTube page with education absolutely free for you, because then you can say, I really love this. Where can I get it? Well, you'll find those links below as well to click on so that you can go to our website and purchase anything that you're watching us do on camera. All right, let me see. It's got a few more cross stitches to do there. But there's only a few fundamental techniques with Anita Goodesign. One of them being quilting, another one being applique. Then there's folded fabric, which is our way of mimicking traditional hand or paper piecing in the hoop, which I have an example to show you here in just a few. In fact, let me go ahead and do that now. It's got a couple more stitches, but this is our flash sale. Right here, On Point Fauna came out in February of 2020. So these are essentially square quilt blocks where the design is turned 45 degrees, so when you sew them together, the aesthetic is up on its point. And each one of these quilt blocks has folded fabric borders built into it as well. So that's our way of doing paper piecing in the hoop. We call it folded fabric. And that flash sale for On Point Fauna, and Lauren, I apologize, would you mind reminding me one more time that was?
It is normally $34.95 on sale for $17.
Normally $34.95 on sale for $17. Get it while it's hot. All right. So we've gone through and we've tacked down our tool. Now I did do these quilting stitches in black as well. At home, you can do it like that if you want to. It's just typically people like their quilting stitches or stippling to blend in with the background. I just did it to make it easier for you to see on camera. So we did all the diamond quilt stitches. We've got our confetti and tool tack down. So let's look and see what comes next. Because at that point in time, that's all there is to doing any type of confetti. Is essentially you're just putting a bunch of scrap material down, purposely somewhat placing it, and then you have something on top to secure it, which in this case was the tool that we used. All right, so I can see on my machine here that we're on step 5. Step 5 here is the placement stitch, then place polar bear applique. All right. So we'll go ahead and run that placement stitch. Again, doing that in a contrasting thread for you to see. When you see the numbers in our number steps, for instance, if we back up to number step 4 on page 5, it starts off with the number 219. And then it says tacking stitch for confetti, etc., etc. Those colors are great references only if you're using the exact same color fabric as us, because we're just using that as a color reference to where if you pick this same colorway, you'll be able to go out and get those actual colors to use to make it look the same. But I would recommend just coordinating whatever threads you get with whatever fabrics you want to use. Now that we've run the placement stitch, it says to then place the polar bear applique. So we're going to go ahead and take ours, which we're using a shimmer fabric. This fabric's cut much larger than what I need, so I'm just going to use a corner of it to cover that placement stitch completely. And what we're doing right here is just standard applique. It doesn't matter what the aesthetic look of that applique is. It doesn't matter if it's hidden applique behind a very intense embroidery design, whether it's the face of this polar bear, or whether it's just a patch going on a shirt. Applique is done the same way every time. It's a placement stitch. Fabric goes right side up. To cover that placement stitch, you tack it in place. Then we're going to trim it up, and then it's going to do whatever type of finish stitch that applique has. This is a standard applique, which means it's going to have our satin stitch finish going around the edge, which to me tells me that I need to trim close when I'm trimming this applique. But how do you know how close to trim? You can always reference the picture steps, which we are on step M in the pictures right now. So I've taken this out of the hoop. You can see it's tacked the applique fabric down. So we're going to go in and trim it up. Again, when you're trimming appliques, the first steps of the applique is always done the same. With that placement stitch, fabric right side up, tack it down. When trimming it, it really depends on the finish stitch style of the applique. For instance, a standard applique where it's doing that satin stitch, well, you'll know after you've done this long enough that if it's doing that satin stitch, you want to trim as close as you can to the tack down, because otherwise anything else is going to be sticking out past the tack down, which won't cause anything bad to happen. It's just not the aesthetic look that most people like. However, everybody's different. Maybe you love fabric sticking out of your satin stitches, which is, I haven't met anyone after 8 years and over 300 shows who is like that, except Lauren. Lauren's in the chat, and she likes sloppy satin stitches.
Don't lie about me.
Speaking of which, by the way, Lauren is answering any questions you have in the chat, and she will also forward on to me questions that would be pertinent for me to answer for the whole class, but she's going to be answering any of your questions one-on-one with you as well there. All right.
They are really loving this design, Brian, and they love that they have a use for their scraps.
That is the best perk. So Lauren was telling me that in the comments, you're saying that you love this design and that you love having a use for your scraps. I know that many of you never throw anything away, which is perfect because we find a way to use everything. So as you can see here, we've trimmed it up all the way around. I've got no more than I'd say about a 1/16 of an inch sticking out past that tack down. You can get away with maybe up to 1/8 of an inch, but you really want to get as close as you can when trimming it. And I'll give you a tip on how to trim those scissors here as soon as I get this next step going. All right, so now that we've got that trimmed up, I'm going to refer back to my number steps because remember the pictures are just on how to do the technique. It's not going to walk me through every single step because the pictures are only for this polar bear. But it's showing me how to do confetti block. What if I was doing this one? I'd have to follow the number steps, but I would know how to trim, I'd know how to place confetti and everything else just by following the pictures. All right, so I can see on my machine here we're on step 7. Step 7 is telling me the placement stitch, then place the back scarf tail applique. All right, and go. So this is one of those things where you're like, Brian, why do I have 2 separate appliques for this scarf? Because in the picture, it's just one color. Well, that's how we did it. But we gave you the option of maybe part of your scarf is flipped around and it's a different color. Whatever you may want to do. I'm going to go ahead and put that down and tack it in place. So again, all we're doing is applique. I just did my placement stitch. I took my fabric, put it right side up, and I'm running that tack down stitch. And then we're just going to treat it like standard applique again because it is a satin stitch finish. So I'm going to trim all the way around. And remember, any of these little scraps from trimming, just go right back in for the next block or next confetti design you want to do. This particular confetti design is for the base of the quilt block, but sometimes we do watercolor confetti. We may do confetti as just the applique itself. There's a lot of different ways to manipulate, different techniques we have, but the techniques at the end of the day are the same. So I told you I was going to give you that tip on trimming and types of scissors I like to use. When you're trimming detailed appliques that have a lot of intricate cuts, especially on something that is like this tulle or if you're on top of organza, then curved tip applique scissors are going to be the way to go. Because if it's straight tip, anytime I'm going into a curve to trim my applique, that straight tip is going to push into the design I'm trying not to cut. The curved tip deflects me away from the design that I don't want to trim and allows me to only trim the material I do want to trim. Double curved tips like these are my favorite because it also keeps my hand off the hoop, keeps me from punching it. A lot of people just prefer the small snips. It's really just your preference when it comes to that point, but I do recommend doing the curved tips for any of that stuff. All right, so now that we have run step 8, the tacking stitch, then trim the back scarf tail applique, we're on to step 9, which is the placement for the rest of the scarf. You may also be wondering, well, we already have the placement, Brian, don't we? Because we ran that whole big placement in the beginning to show us where all those appliques were going to go. That placement was more of a no-go zone, and it's slightly inset from the actual placement stitches themselves. That way, it allows you to get a little bit in there with your confetti, so it doesn't look like a purposeful border. It looks like the actual polar bear is sitting on top of all that confetti, as opposed to having it butt up next to him. So for class, I'm using, again, that same color fabric. We're appliquing once more. You can see how our designs become wash, rinse, repeat, because again, we're just doing applique. Didn't matter that I'm doing it on this quilt block over and over, or maybe you're doing these appliques, which will be a lot of fun to do, with our heat and shrink technique, rather. Not that we make heat and shrink, but it's a technique where, we'll stitch out a quilt block with some running stitches with a material called heat and shrink, steam it so it scrunches up around all those stitches, then we'll use that as our actual applique. But at the end of the day, it's applique. Placement stitch for the legs, put that heat and shrink on top, tack it, trim it, satin stitch, etc., for all of the different appliques that go on there. So just to reiterate, when you're learning to do any of our different designs, you're having fun today learning how to make a confetti block, but you've really learned quilt block, embroidery, and applique, which are 3 of the main techniques we use in just about everything. All right. Now that we've trimmed that up, or excuse me, stitched that down rather, we're going to do our last trim here before we start running our finished stitches. Okay. So once again, when you're trimming any of this stuff, another trick, and I don't know how well you can see. Can they see my hand down here in the frame? So you'll notice that as I'm trimming, I'm gripping the rest of that relatively taut. This actually makes it to where I barely need a snip, because if your scissors are sharp, then it's just going to pull the material to where you don't have to cut as much. One thing that is very prevalent in classes where I'm teaching new people is you'll notice there's a huge lag between the veterans and the newbies. Even though most of the work is the digitizing and the machine just running, the biggest difference in between someone finishing a block in, say, an hour versus someone else finishing it in 2 hours is literally the trimming. And so when we have to run a lot of production here, you learn how to actually trim things really quick, different tricks, and holding the excess material that you've trimmed taut, you'll be able to just glide your blade along the edge of the tack down, getting a nice clean cut at a much rather faster speed. Okay. Now you can see that we have all of our appliques tacked down. We've got our confetti down. We're pretty much ready to move on to the embroidery steps of the design to finish up our project. So, I'm going to wind this up here. We'll go back over to step, always glance at your machine first. If you're like me, you get distracted easily and you might forget where you're at. But I'm on step 11. Step 11 in my number steps is telling me to do the satin stitch around the polar bear head. I know what color fabric I use. Now I'm going to switch it to a tonal thread. So I'm going to be doing this off-white on our off-white shimmer fabric that we used for the head of the polar bear as I get the thread completely tied around my fingers. Okay. Get that going here and then we'll go over some other stuff. All right, so to recap so far, what we've done and what you've learned about today, one, is what you can do with all the scraps you have in your thread catcher. Maybe you sort yours by color at the end of the day. That way you already may know about our confetti blocks. You may love to use them in that. Maybe you have other things you do with your scraps. But we've learned about how we can use them as an aesthetic within our appliques, or in this case, the base of the actual quilt block. We've learned how to make a quilt block, so that's not going to change. Doesn't matter if we were doing the quilt block for this guy right here, for the heat and shrink, where we're just doing tonal quilting stitches on top. I am from Charlotte, and every once in a while it slips out. But this is the same exact quilt block technique. I have my squaring stitch. In this case, we took batting, we put it down with our heat and shrink. Then we put the top fabric down. Same first steps that we used to create this quilt block. The only difference is that we didn't put all that confetti and tulle down. We just did our base fabric. Then we did the quilting stitches. We did applique, which again, to reiterate and show you more of these heat and shrink designs, which again, heat and shrink's a lot of fun, adds a lot of fun dimension to the actual appliques, but all this is a placement stitch, heat and shrink right side up, tack it down. So you don't actually have to be a quilter. You don't have to actually want to make quilts with any of our stuff, because our actual quilt blocks, much like the one I was showing you a moment ago for the flash sale. Again, this is on Point Fauna, which is our current flash sale, 50% off on the website. These are all individual quilt blocks, so I can make a quilt out of it. Or maybe I just wanted to make an oversized pillow with these same blocks. Or maybe I just wanted to make a normal sized pillow with the other guys. Maybe I wanted to make a placemat, or a table runner, or a waist apron, pot holder, a trivet, you name it. Those are all made with the quilt blocks as the foundation. So you may not be a quilter, but knowing our quilt block technique allows you to make all the building blocks you'll need to go through and do all of our fun projects that we have, and much, much more. What's even more fun about it is that our quilting collections come in, they're basically mix and match. So they come in a set number of sizes. So you have everything that'll fit into a 5x7 hoop all the way up to the largest hoops out there. So what if I see a couple different quilting collections I think would go great together? Well, then I would just stitch them all out in the same size hoop, and all those blocks will fit together rather. So therefore, if I get a project design that's teaching me how to make a tote bag out of 16 quilt blocks that are stitched out in a 6x10 inch hoop, well, I might not like the design on those quilt blocks that came with the actual project. That doesn't have to ruin anything, because now you can go through our catalog of quilt blocks, pick quilt blocks from any design, stitch them out in the size the pattern calls for, and then just follow the pattern to finish it, allowing you to customize any of the wonderful projects we've come out with over the years. Lauren, there was the, because I'm talking about quilting, the quilt collection of the day.
Quilting collection of the day on social media.
Thank you very much.
40% off a new quilting collection each day.
You got it. So we also have, each day this month, we're doing a quilt collection of the day. Be sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook. for more details and to find out how you can score big deals every single day of this month getting a new quilting collection, especially now that you know how to do all of our quilting collections. Yes, Lauren?
Will you remind them that this video will live on YouTube if they are late or have to leave early?
Absolutely. For those of you who may be concerned that either one, you're not where I am at with the project, maybe you finished already, or two, if you have to leave or if you joined late, once this stream ends from its live version, you'll be able to go back and rewatch it on our YouTube channel as many times as you like. And speaking of likes, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Once you hit subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell. What that's going to do is anytime that we're going live or we post a new video, you're going to get notified so that you can always stay up to date with us. And it also helps push us out there to the rest of everyone in the world who may not know about us yet. Helps grow our community larger and get more people in here to the chat rooms to give us more ideas. So let me pull back up.
You can always do prizes too.
Say one more time.
You can give some prizes. Prizes.
Prizes, yeah. Why, somebody saying prizes?
Yes.
Who'd like some prizes? Lauren, I think since our class got started a little bit late today, I'm going to start off the first prize as a double whammy because we normally do $20 gift cards, but I'm going to send you a $40 gift card for this first prize. $40 gift card. All you have to do is type in sound. Type in sound in the comments and we'll pick your name here shortly for the largest gift card ever given away on any Watch and Stitch we've ever done. As Lauren's going through there and picking that, I can see that my current step is finished. So reading along, I know that I'm on step 12 based on my machine. Step 12 is the satin stitch around the scarf. So once again, I'm picking a tonal thread because that's just what I want to do. And I'm going to use that to finish off the edges of the actual scarf itself. You'll notice beyond this point, if you're looking ahead in your number steps, as I'm getting this thread off of there, that after that, step 13, 14, 15 is pretty much the details beyond that point. Again, we're using the Floriani numbers for the actual thread, but don't ever let the actual thread colors throw you for a loop. All you need to do is identify what we're referencing, and you can pick whatever colors you want to go on yours. The only time I would advise against that is if you're doing a tile seam. Unless you've done a lot of tile seams and you know how they work, I'd recommend going with the swatch list we prepare in the tutorial and the recommended colors. That way it actually coordinates properly. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through and rewrite every color change that you do throughout your book. But the tile scenes are beautiful. They're always fun. There's a lot that we have out there. When it comes to something like this, not a tile scene, it's completely your choice on how you want the colors to look, what color thread you want, etc., because it's going to look great almost no matter what. And where did I put it? Oh, here we go. Some of the other projects that we have coming to you later on are the embroidered cards, which embroidered cards are always a fan favorite. Still more over this one. They're always a fan favorite. These are just quick, simple running stitch designs on the actual cardstock itself. So when you're doing these, they just used a batiste as the actual base fabric, a candlewick stitch around the edge. That way it doesn't actually perforate the whole card. And then this running stitch design in a single color means that depending on your hoop size, you can crank out a lot of these because, as we like to say at Anita, not everybody is quilt worthy. You're not going out every Christmas and making everyone in the office a queen size quilt because they're not going to appreciate it. However, doing something thoughtful that's quick and easy, like doing a bunch of personally made cards, not just stuff that you buy from Hallmark, is just one example of the many things that we have. This one.
We have our winner,
Who's the winner?
Annette Polarine.
Annette Polarine. You are the winner. If I mispronounce your name, it's Lauren's fault. Congratulations. All you need to do is just shoot us an email to customerexperience@anita-goodesign.com. Let us know that you won the $40 gift card, and we'll send that right over to you. Because essentially what you just did is you want enough money to pay for this, which is the Watch and Stitch March for $30, and you have $10 to go spend on the flash sale that I showed you, which once again was on Point Fauna, 50% off. Get it while you can. And actually, let me go ahead and bring that back up while this is doing that long satin stitch, because I don't know how zoomed in it is, but good enough. So, to reiterate, this is the actual quilt block, and I hope you're seeing it okay, because I'm trying to see it also. So this is the actual quilt block. It's just a square quilt block like we just made. But instead of having, it go edge to edge, we did these folded fabric pieces around the edges as the border. We did that in the hoop as we built it. So whenever you see something with a folded edge, whether it looks like applique or a border, it's typically done just, again, using our folded fabric technique, which, again, there's tons of videos on how to do it, but it's how we replicate traditional hand or paper piecing in the hoop. So all we do for folded fabric is it's going to do a placement stitch. Then I'm going to take, instead of applique, we went right side up, I'm going to take my fabric and put it right side down, opposite of the direction where I want it to fold. It's going to do a folding stitch. Now I didn't have to measure anything. I didn't have to expertly sew a straight stitch and make sure things were actually done 100% correctly, because the machine just did it for me. Then I can pull it over, I have my folded edge, I'll tack it all down, and that's one piece of folded fabric. All you do when you're doing a block that has a bunch in them is you just repeat that step over and over for all those pieces of folded fabric. It basically makes somebody who is a novice when it comes to quilting look like a pro, because they didn't actually have to measure anything. They didn't have to actually straight stitch or sew any of those paper piece looking appliques in there. It's all done right in the machine, just following our steps. And to recap, those are the biggest things at Anita Goodesign, is just standard embroidery, which is just us changing the thread, because the digitizing does all the embroidery. It's just our applique, our quilt block, and folded fabric. Literally 99% of everything that we do outside of actually sewing pieces together are based on those four things. Whether it's doing lace snowflakes on water soluble, that's just embroidery. Whether it's doing the Last Supper tile scene, which a lot of you may be familiar with. If not, check it out on the website. But it's a massive tile scene, and behind each, and behind all of the embroidery is what we call hidden applique. But it's still applique. It's done the exact same way. Placement stitch, fabric right side up, tack it, trim it, etc. Folded fabric, whether we're doing it on the border, whether it's to get a folded edge on a zipper bag around our zipper, whether it's doing a Bargello quilt the Anita Goodesign way, it's all just folded fabric. Those same steps repeated. And the reason that's important is because there's no way we'd be able to release as much as we do on a monthly basis and come up with everything if we're trying to reinvent the wheel every single time. So everyone from our artist to graphics and everybody in between knows that our main techniques are done the same way every time. So that way, when it gets from the artist to a digitizer, the digitizer already knows what he's supposed to do, what she's supposed to do. When it gets out to our creative department, they already know, without any tutorial, exactly what they should do, because it's the same techniques, just in a different aesthetic look. And the reason I like bringing that up and pointing it out, whether it's on these live streams or when I'm in person with you in class, is because oftentimes you'll be overwhelmed when you go on our website. You see all the things you can do, and you think they've all got to be so different, or they must require a lot of skill. You're literally not doing anything different to make the vast majority of what we do outside of what I just showed you. Even though ours is going to be a confetti block, it's done the same way as the On Point Fauna, outside of those folded fabric borders, which shouldn't scare you, because you're not measuring anything, you're not sewing anything. You're just following our paint by numbers approach with the placement stitches, tack down stitches, etc. So it takes all that guesswork out, makes designs look beautiful enough to where if you are a seasoned veteran and you're just tired of having to do all that work, it'll still look beautiful. But if you are literally brand new to this and you just learned how to put the thread on your machine, it's going to make you look like a pro, because the digitizing is excellent. They test every single design out, stitch it out, just as you can see we have on the table. We don't just make these things for fun, we actually test every single thing that we create. It's done with a satin stitch around the actual scarf, and I can see that step 13 is for my eyes. It's telling me 900, which is the stark black Floriani, but that's up to you. Whatever eye color rather you would like to use, whatever tone of black, charcoal, anything like that. If you're using a black-based fabric and you want to do white eyes, don't let the colors hang you up. And speaking of colors, how do we pick all the colors every single month for different collections? So we'll essentially have a meeting every 6 months where we come up with a schedule of everything we want to release during that time period. We'll give those schedules based on dates to our artists, who will then draw their concepts. We'll get thumbs up, thumbs down, rework it if we need to. When it gets to the digitizers and we're full steam ahead, that's when in the creative department, they're going ahead and they're picking the different fabrics that they're going to want to use. They're picking the different colored threads, but how do you do that? If I go into an actual fabric shop, the way not to do it is to walk in with some thread you have and then walk up and down the aisles all day trying to find fabric that coordinates. The best way to do it is to find some bolts of fabric that really speak to you, or maybe you have some at home, and then go out and get what you need, whether it's a little bit more fabric or thread. It's easier to take a bolt of fabric and walk up to a thread stand or wherever they're merchandising their thread at in a store and pick threads to coordinate than it is to grab a few threads and try to walk up and down all those aisles trying to find fabric to coordinate. So that's how we start off with all of that. Then it goes to making a storyboard with those colors and threads so that if we have 3 or 4 different people running a collection, it all coordinates. Let's see. This one says $4.87 for the nose, which is a gray. I want his nose to be black. Mainly just so I didn't have to change the thread. All right. How about another prize? Let's do some prizes while we get this nose stitched out. So this is going to be for a $20 gift card that you can use on our website. And the $20 gift card, all you need to do in the comments is type confetti. We'll pick a winner in just a moment for a $20 gift card to use on our website. Code word, confetti. And remember that these watch and stitch are on every single month, but the designs themselves, you can check the link below, $30 on our website. Can't be used with coupon codes or anything like that because this is educational material. It's not a standard retail collection, meaning it's not just put out there as retail, it's put out there as education. So much like our Anita's universities, these were created to teach from by us as educators. So they're a little bit special, a little more different. Because you get personal time with us when you buy these, because the videos are made live, as we're doing them right now, and you'll be able to go back and rewatch these as many times as you want. Again, maybe you're watching this months down the road. Links down below. You can go on there and still get the Watch and Stitch, March of 2022, to be able to do not only the design I'm doing today, the designs that we're going to be doing every Tuesday when we do this at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the rest of the month and for the foreseeable future. Each month we'll bring a new watch and stitch and new designs to go along with it. All right, we're on to the last step of the design, which is the eyebrows, base of eyes, mouth and chin, etc. This again is using an off-white. I think I'm going to use a little bit darker of the tone off-white just so it shows up a little more on there. And one of the reasons a few moments ago I was stressing not to get too hung up on the colors we use is because, like I said, if it's not a tile scene, then you're not using the same fabrics or similar color fabrics that we ended up using. And tile scenes are obviously meant to recreate something very specific, whether it's that Last Supper or, I mean, you name it, we have tons of them out there. This is abstract, what we're doing right now. So whatever fabrics you choose, remember, pick the fabrics first. That's when you go over to your threads and start pulling in threads to coordinate with those fabrics, and you'll use what you chose instead. A lot of people like to print these off, but if you have the interactive PDF version as well, depending on whether or not you have an editable version of Adobe, you'll be able to go in and even make notes in your tutorials, etc. All right. Going through the last one, so do we have a winner?
Yeah, we have a winner. It's Karen Davis.
Say that last name for me.
Karen Davis.
Karen Davis, you are the winner. Congratulations. If you just go ahead and email us at customerexperience@anita-goodesign.com, let us know you won that $20 gift card and we'll send it right over to you. Our gift cards never expire, and if you'd like the biggest gift card you could possibly get, well, then you just go to our website and sign up for our All Access Club program. That way, every month when we release any of our retail collections, you get them all bundled together with the tutorials. And when you sign up for that club program, if you do a 12-month subscription for the $1,400 for an entire year, which is way cheaper than going out and buying individual collections throughout the year, you get a $1,400 gift card to go right along with that. That way, throughout the rest of the year, while you're getting all your new retail stuff, you have that gift card to spend on other things we release that aren't a part of our retail collections. Or maybe you just go back in and back build your library. All right. Clean up some of this mess real quick as we're wrapping up. And just to reiterate, when you're going through the first time to do this, so maybe you tuned in right at the end, always make sure you go through your materials list first to get everything prepped. In your tutorial, remember that the actual picture steps are not what you want to use first. They're very handy. Always go straight to the number steps. Use these first, go back and reference your pictures if you're wondering what anything meant. And as an example for that, when it said on here for step 3, tacking stitch, do not trim base fabric, then place confetti and netting. Well, if I've never done this before, I'm like, well, how am I supposed to place my confetti and netting? That's when I go over to my picture steps. Get in the habit of doing that because, again, your picture steps are not going through every single embroidery step. It's just going through the techniques, things we're doing with our hands, and what something should actually look like when we're referencing to do it. So it really helps you hone in on all the different ways to create these designs. All right. And as we're wrapping this up, because it's about to finish the last stitch here now, once again, don't forget to, if you have social media, Facebook or Instagram, go on there and follow us. Remember to check out on our social media today. Every day this month, we're doing a quilt block of the day that'll be discounted with a link right there for you. So you can stack up all those things. And don't forget to get this design pack itself. We'll be doing more next week, again on Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's it. Beyond this point, all we're doing is taking it out of the hoop, trimming it to a 1/2-inch seam allowance, and then stacking up our blocks until we're ready to use it for whatever you like, whether it's that quilt, the placemat, or whether you're making a pillow out of it. Doesn't matter. It's all done with the foundation of this quilt block, so I'm glad you got to join us here today to win a couple prizes, learn all of our fundamental techniques, and a new fun way of doing an aesthetic approach with confetti. We'll see you next time on the next Watch and Stitch.